It's Random Thoughts again, and this is the second video I'm doing about the diary of the guy who shot Koitalel Arap Samoei, a guy who went by the name Richard Meinertzhagen. Now, in the last video, I did talk about his arrival in Kenya and a few of his expeditions while he was here. And there are a few things I didn't mention, at least clearly, and one of those is the year that he came to Kenya. This guy arrived in Kenya in 1902. Some parts of the video I was talking about 1906. That was an error. This guy arrived in Mombasa and then Nairobi in 1902, and he stayed in Kenya from 1902 to 1906. And I need to clarify that the diary was published as a book in 1957, and the guy was still alive by then. So somebody else did mention that there are many who have thought that this guy was a fraud, that there are so many things he says in the book that are not accurate. He made them up. He was mostly a liar. It turns out that there are even books that have been published discussing how this guy was a conman. One of those books is a book that was apparently published in 2008, and the title of the book is The Meinertzhagen Mystery, The Life and Legend of a Colossal Fraud. Now, I intend to read this book. Once I'm done going through this diary, I intend to read this book. But even before I read it, I have my concerns. I'm not saying that Meinertzhagen was not a conman. He clearly was likely, or it's very highly likely that he was a conman, that he did at least lie about some things. But I'm a bit skeptical about this book, The Meinertzhagen Mystery, The Life and Legend of a Colossal Fraud. And I'm not saying I'm skeptical because I think whatever is in the book is not accurate. I just think we need to be very cautious with some of these books. And I can see the motivation for such a book to be published, especially as a way to take pressure or responsibility from the British Empire of the death of Koitalel Arap Samoei, for example, or other actions that this guy did take. So I'm not saying that this latter book is inaccurate, and I'm saying that just to say that I don't want to treat the other book as something we can just dismiss, because there is also a possibility that the latter book has been written for some other reasons, PR, propaganda as we call it. I'm still reading the diary, as I've said, and as I mentioned in the previous video, the ultimate event that I want to see how this guy covers is the death of Koitalel Arap Samoei, but I don't want to rush to that part of the book. I just want to read along, and I don't want to just keep quiet until I reach that point. I'm going to share whatever things I find in the diary. Now, reading so far, I realized something caught my attention, and the diary itself gives us a very interesting picture of what was happening as the British were at this point basically arriving in Kenya. They had not yet settled per se. They were still trying to figure out how to settle on this land. And what caught my attention is the expectation of the British who were here, including this guy, Meinertzhagen, that the locals just had to know who is the good guy and who is the bad guy. And he fails to realize that to the locals, every white person was the bad guy. They failed to see that, and the Africans had every reason to see these invaders, these people who just came to their land and just started changing everything and trying to force them to live in a certain way. Of course, they had to feel that all these people are invaders. The reason I'm saying that, there is an event that happens where Meinertzhagen and his team, they go to Abadeas. They are moving towards the Abadeas. And then at some point, there is a white man who was killed by the locals. And of course, these British will feel very bad when the locals kill a white man. And they didn't want to understand the other side, that these people saw them as invaders, people who just came to their land and they are trying to dictate everything. And this white man was killed. He doesn't give the actual details on how that happened actually, but he was killed, and that made them so mad that they had to go and punish the Africans. Now, this punishment used to be just mass punishment. They didn't even care whether the people they were punishing were actually the people who did the deed. For them, this guy had been killed by a tribe of Kikuyus. We're just going to punish Kikuyus. And he talks about them going to their badeas, and the local villages, people in the local villages run into the forest to hide with their animals, and then they go kill a few men who are still not hiding, who are outside the forest, and after killing them, they pursue the animals that were with the kids and the women, and they take away the sheep and the goats, and then they let the women and the children run into the forest, and then they take those. So it was a huge number of sheep and goats, and they drive those animals and basically take them. They take them to be property of whoever, maybe the British government or just these guys will divide those up. Now, something happens at the same time. Apparently, there were some three white guys, British guys, who were roaming to the north of what we know today as Kenya. That is Marsabit, around Marsabit, and those parts of what we know today as Kenya. By then, it wasn't actually Kenya. But these guys were roaming those sides and raiding the local tribes. These guys were not affiliated by, they were not part of the government. They were not part of the British government. These were just private citizens who had come here, and they had guns, and they had hired porters and a few guys to be with them. And then they would just roam that countryside, raiding local villages and taking sheep and goats and animals for themselves, and then driving those animals to Naivasha or Nakuru. And then looks like they were putting them on the train, take them to the coast or wherever, just make money out of it. So Meinertzhagen and other government officials were not happy about these guys, and they have them arrested. And after they've been arrested, they are taken to court, and then they are trying to look for witnesses from the north, Marsabit, that part of it. He says that it was the land of the Samburu. I don't think it was actually Marsabit, because he says it was the land of the Samburus and the Rendiles. Now, they tried to go talk to the Rendiles and the Samburus to come and testify against these three people. Those people don't want to get involved. And then they use their own, the guys, these robbers who are using these rustlers, we can call them like cattle rustlers. We can basically call them, they were some sort of cattle rustlers. They take their own porters and their own employees and use them as witnesses. But Meinertzhagen tells us that there was no way these guys were going to be found guilty, especially because the jury was white, so they were basically let go. But I found that to be so interesting, because Meinertzhagen was just from taking sheep of Africans by force, just taking the sheep, and he didn't see that to be of any problem. And then he's accusing other guys of taking sheep and goats from Rendiles and Samburus, and he thinks that it was wrong. But then I could not understand how we could not see the other side, like for the African. Then he was wondering, why are the Samburus and the Rendiles not coming to testify against these guys? And then he doesn't realize that for the Samburus and the Rendiles and the Kikuyus and the rest of the indigenous people, to them, all these people were white, all these people were doing the same. What Meinertzhagen did in Badeas, taking the sheep, was not any different from what these other guys did to the Samburus and the Rendiles. And I found that to be very interesting, that somehow he was expecting the local people to differentiate them and to somehow believe that the actions of Meinertzhagen and his team was justified and morally right, while the actions of these three cattle rustlers, we can call them, who were white, was wrong and needed to be punished for that. But he fails to see that to the local communities, it didn't make any difference whether it was some private white men raiding their villages or some guys in uniforms who said they were soldiers of the British Empire who were raiding their villages. Now I'm going to continue reading this diary. I don't think it's not a very long book, so I don't think it will take us many videos before we arrive at the events that led to the murder of Koitalel Arap Samoei. Those are my random thoughts.